Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
All right, we're back. Battles of American Civil War Behind the Battles. And for this week's episode, we got something hasn't happened in a lot of our profiles so far. A guy who died in battle. We haven't had too many of those. We've only had one.
Stonewall Jackson.
Stonewall, I believe.
And what's his face?
Oh, yeah. Albert Sidney Johnson. That was the only two that died in battle that we've done so far. Jeb. Never mind. Jeb did.
Yeah, Jeb Stewart.
Custer, but he died in obviously later.
Right.
Everybody else, though, made it out.
Made it out.
They made it out. Now
Lived
this guy,
shitty lives afterwards.
John Reynolds. He was one of the most respected senior commanders. Played a key role in committing the Army of the Potomac to the Battle of Gettysburg. Unfortunately for him, was killed at the very start of that battle. Also, there's some controversy as to how and who killed him as well. So
I think it was friendly fire.
we'll get to that coming up. First, we're going to go all the way back to Lancaster, Pennsylvania in the early 19th century. That's where old John Fulton Reynolds was born. One of 9 surviving children in the household of John Reynolds.
Okay.
Born in 1787. Old John Jr., by the way, I don't know if he's a junior, but he was born September 20th, 1820. To his mother, Lydia Moore Reynolds, born in 1794.
Wow.
This is a big family with some heavy hitters among the siblings. One of old Johnny's brothers, James Lefevre Reynolds. He would become the Quartermaster General of Pennsylvania.
Fantastic.
Another one, William, he would rise through the ranks of the Navy and eventually become a Rear Admiral.
Ooh. Well, before John ever wore a uniform, his education took him through several schools. He started off in nearby Lidditz, just about 6 miles from Lancaster. Then he studied at a school in Long Green, Maryland. Right after that, he finished up school at Lancaster County Academy. His path to a military career opened up thanks to a family connection, as usually everything does back then. Family connection, friends, or whatever. 1837, Senator James Buchanan. Yes, President Buchanan, future President Buchanan, a close friend of the family, nominated young Reynolds to the United States Military Academy at West Point. Reynolds graduated in the class of 1841, 26th out of 50. So he's mid,
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Not the very top, but not the bottom. That graduation earned him a commission as a brevet second lieutenant in the 3rd U.S. Artillery. His very first assignment, you guessed it, Fort McHenry. That famous star-shaped fort in Baltimore Harbor.
Sure is,
I'm
which
sure
is,
all you Baltimoreans see it all the time.
If you look it up now, it's an overgrown mess, and they haven't kept up on it.
We're assholes.
Well, from 1842 to 45, Reynolds served at posts in St. Augustine, Florida, and at Fort Moultrie in South Carolina.
Nice.
But soon enough, the country was at war, and Reynolds, he was on the move. He joined General Zachary Taylor's army down at Corpus Christi, Texas. That's when the U.S. is starting to prepare for the old Mexican-American War.
Oh, look at that. A guy who was there before that.
Right.
Didn't get too late, huh?
Well, unlike some contemporaries, Reynolds left few published personal letters or memoir about the Mexican-American War. Most knowledge of his actions comes from official registers, later biographies, and battle narratives rather than his own reports.
Okay.
Well, we do know that it was in Mexico that Reynolds, he began to stand out. He was awarded not 1, but 2 brevet promotions for his conduct. First one was to captain for gallantry at Monterey, and then to major after the Battle of Buena Vista. At that battle, his section of artillery guns played a decisive role, stopping the Mexican cavalry from outflanking the American left.
Oh.
It was no small feat, and it cemented his reputation as a cool-headed officer under fire. Oh, Cool John.
The war also gave Reynolds a chance to build relationships with other officers who would later play major roles in the Civil War. Among them, Winfield Scott Hancock, who would fight on the Union side, Louis Armistead, who would fight for the old Rebs. Both became his friends during this campaign, as a lot of people were friends with each side of the war back then. When the war was over, Reynolds returned to a series of peacetime assignments. He served at Fort Preble in Maine. Then he went down to Nolens, and later Fort Lafayette in New York. 1855, he was sent all the way west to Fort Orford in Oregon. Damn. This is when he caught up in the Rogue River Wars of 1856, which was a conflict between the United States Army and native tribes in the region. Not long after, he was pulled into another major conflict, the Utah War. In 1857 to 1858, this is when tensions between the United States government and Mormon settlers boiled over. They're like, dude, you already kicked us out of Pennsylvania and New York. Well, what the hell? Not Pennsylvania, New York. You kicked us out of New York, and now you're coming over here telling us what to do.
Kicked them out of Illinois.
Mormon was in New York.
Mormons came from Illinois after New York.
After New York, maybe, but started in New York.
They settled in 1839 and then got kicked out in 1846.
They're in New York first, though.
Well, by 1860, Reynolds, he's back at West Point. From September of that year till June of 1861, war's already going. He served as the commandant of cadets.
Oh.
At the same time, he taught artillery, cavalry, and infantry tactics, passing on the skills he had honed in the field. That's crazy. Well, somewhere in this period, Reynolds, he also found time for some romance. While traveling back from the West, he became engaged to Catherine May Hewitt. But their engagement, it was kept a secret. Reynolds, he was a Protestant. Hewitt was a Catholic.
Ooh.
And in that era, mixed denomination marriages could cause serious family friction.
Yeah, it did, Major.
Hewitt's parents didn't even know about the engagement until after Reynolds' death years later.
Oh, wow.
It was one more personal story tucked behind the public image of the disciplined, duty-bound officer.
Damn right. Oh, when the old Civil War broke out between the old North and the South, old John, his reputation as a capable officer, put him in demand right away. Almost immediately, he was offered a pretty prestigious role, aide-de-camp to Lieutenant General Winfield Scott, the old war hero of the Mexican-American War, who was now commanding the Union armies altogether. But old John Reynolds, he said, no, just like a lot of these guys we just covered do. I'm good. He didn't want to be tied to a desk or headquarters. He wanted to be in the field. Instead, he accepted a commission as Lieutenant Colonel of the 14th U.S. Infantry. But before he could even get properly started with that regiment, the War Department had other plans. 20th of August, 1861, old John Reynolds was promoted Brigadier General. He'd ordered to report to the capital of the United States of America, which is in Washington, D.C.
Yes, it is, except his orders didn't stay the same for long.
Oh, they never do.
While he was in transit to D.C., they were suddenly changed, directing him to report instead to Cape Hatteras in North Carolina.
At least he was going that way.
Right. But then came another change. Major General George McClellan stepped in personally and convinced the Secretary of War to cancel those orders.
Oh, wow.
McClellan, he wanted Reynolds in the brand new Army of the Potomac, and that's indeed where he ended up.
So he has to go back up towards Washington, D.C. All right.
At first, Reynolds, he was placed on board. He was placed on a board that examined the qualifications of volunteer officers. Wasn't exactly a glamorous posting. But soon enough, he was given what he wanted, a field command, and he led the Brigade of Pennsylvania Reserves.
Oh, that's cool. Wow. When McClellan's army, they launched the Peninsula Campaign in 1862, Reynolds and his brigade played an important role. He occupied Fredericksburg, even served as the city's military governor. But there was no time to settle into that role either, because orders came soon to move out, and his brigade joined the 5th Corps at Mechanicsville, arriving just in time for the brutal fighting of the 7 Days Battle, which we've done. 26th of June, the Battle of Beaver Dam Creek. Confederate forces hit Reynolds' brigade hard. Despite heavy pressure, his line, they held firm. He later received a letter of commendation from his division commander, Brigadier General George McCall. He praised his performance under fire. He was pretty good under fire.
Well, the very next day, though, the Battle of the 7 Days Battles continued June 27th at Gaines Mill.
Yep.
After 2 days of intense combat and little to no sleep, Reynolds, he was completely exhausted. During the retreat, he thought he had reached a relatively safe position in Boatswain Swamp.
I mean, it's a swamp, right?
He laid down and he was overcome with fatigue and he fell asleep.
Oh, no.
But when he woke up, it was to the startling reality that his men had pulled back, leaving him behind.
Oh, wow.
Confederate troops surrounded him, and Reynolds, one of the Union rising stars, he was taken prisoner.
Damn. Dude
How
got
do you
caught
let
sleeping.
your guy stay there by himself?
Dude got caught napping.
He got caught napping.
Wow. It was an especially awkward capture. Well, this is because the Confederate general he was brought to was D.H. Hill, an old friend and colleague from before the war. Oh, John, he was embarrassed. He was like, D.H., I don't want you to see me like this. He probably felt humiliated, but Hill tried to soften the blow. He said, Johnny boy, do not feel so bad about your capture. It is the fate of wars.
I guess.
All right. From there, Reynolds was transported to Richmond, locked up in Libby Prison, the notorious Confederate prison for Union officers. Fortunately enough for him, though, his imprisonment didn't last very long, because on the 15th of August, 1862, less than 2 months, he was exchanged for Confederate General Lloyd Tilghman Tilghman. And Reynolds was back in the Union ranks again.
As he's back in the Union ranks. Well, when old Johnny Boy returned from his brief imprisonment, he didn't just slip back into his old role. He came back with a promotion of sorts. He was given the command of the entire Pennsylvania Reserves Division. Their previous commander, George McCall, had also been captured just 2 days after Reynolds.
Wow.
So the division needed a steady hand, and old McCall ain't back yet. Soon after, the Pennsylvania Reserves were attached to the Army of Virginia, which by then was commanded by Major General John Pope. That set the stage for one of Reynolds' defining moments. At Second Bull Run, the Union Army was being driven back in chaos. On the second day of fighting, August 30th, most of the Union lines, they were already in retreat.
Damn right they were. But old Reynolds refused to simply fall back. On Henry House Hill, the very site of the crushing Union defeat at the very first Bull Run, he and his men made a desperate stand. To rally his men, old Reynolds grabbed the flag of the 2nd Pennsylvania Reserves and waved it high, shouted over the din of the battle, and he called out, "Now, boys, give them the steel! Charge bayonets! Double quick!" His men surged forward in a bayonet charge. The attack didn't win the battle, but it did something critical. It halted the old rebel advance just long enough for the rest of the Union Army to retreat in better order. Many historians point to this moment as one of the most important factors in preventing the Union Army from being completely destroyed on that field that very day.
Not long after that, though, another crisis came. This time, not from the battlefield, but from politics.
Oh, of course.
When Robert E. Lee marched his army into Maryland, September 1862, Pennsylvania's Governor Andrew Curtin, he was terrified that his state might be invaded. He specifically requested that Reynolds be pulled away from the Army of the Potomac and then put in charge of the Pennsylvania militia to help defend the state.
Oh, wow. Didn't help any.
And this decision didn't sit well with the generals in the field. George McClellan and Joseph Hooker both complained that a scared governor ought not to be permitted to destroy the usefulness of an entire division.
Damn right.
But in the end, Governor Curtin got his way. For 2 weeks, Reynolds drilled militia units, many of them made up of older men and young boys, while the Army of the Potomac marched down towards Antietam.
Oh, NTM.
Which meant Reynolds completely missed the single bloodiest day in American history. I don't think he would have minded.
Right. He's like, oh, whew.
Jeez.
Wow, but late 1862, Reynolds returned to active command in the Army of the Potomac. This time, he wasn't just leading the division.
He was the division.
Right. He was given command of the 1st Corps, one of the largest corps in the whole Army. His men thrown into action almost immediately. Battle of Fredericksburg. In that fight, one of Reynolds' division commanders, Major General George Meade, he achieved the only real breakthrough of Bluecoats' action. But the opportunity slipped away fast. Reynolds did not commit his other 2 divisions to support Meade's push. Part of the problem was, though, he was confused. He never received a clear understanding from his superior, Major General William Franklin, about exactly what role in this attack that he was supposed to be. Well, the result, you ask? General Meade's attack collapsed without support, and the Bluecoats, well, they suffered another crushing defeat at Fredericksburg.
Yeah, well, just before Fredericksburg, though, Reynolds, he had received another promotion. I don't know why we didn't say that before that. November 29th, 1862, he was appointed Major General of Volunteers. In acknowledgement of his leadership and the respect he commanded in the Army, even as Union fortunes continued to sag. Shag. In May of 1863, the Union Army was gearing up for another major offensive.
Uh-oh.
This time was under the command of Major General Joseph Hooker.
Oh.
Hooker had once led the 1st Corps himself, but now he was in charge of the whole Army of the Potomac.
Okay.
That meant old John, still commanding the 1st Corps, he was once again serving under a man he didn't always see eye to eye with.
I mean, it's a common theme.
What happens, bud?
Common theme. Take a look at the Battle of Chancellorsville. Well, Hooker initially placed Johnny Boy and the 1st Corps on the far left flank of the Union line, which is southeast of Fredericksburg. The idea was to put pressure on the Confederate right and keep them off balance. But Hooker changed his mind. 2nd of May, he ordered the 1st Corps to march nearly 20 miles in broad daylight, shifting them all the way around to the extreme right of the Army, which was northwest of the 11th Corps. The march was plagued by delays, poor communication, logistical snags, and the need to move cautiously to avoid running headlong into Confederate patrols. By the time John and his men were on the move, it was already too late. That very evening, Lieutenant General Thomas Stonewall Jackson, he launched his famous flank attack, crashing into the unsuspecting 11th Corps and routing them. The collapse of Hooker's flank shattered his confidence, and from that point on, he lost the nerve to stay on the offensive. Wow.
May 4th, Hooker, he convened a late-night council of war. Around the table, the generals voted on whether the army should continue fighting or withdraw.
Ooh.
Reynolds, he voted to press on.
Might as well. Keep on keeping on, baby.
And the tally of that night came out to 3-2 in favor of continuing the battle.
Damn.
But Hooker didn't care. He ignored the vote that he called. He already decided the army would retreat. He just wanted to know everybody's opinion, I guess.
Right.
Don't say I didn't ask.
Oh, right. Son of a bitch.
Reynolds, exhausted, understandably, he'd gone to sleep after giving his proxy vote to George Meade. When he woke up and heard that Hooker had ignored the majority, he muttered loud enough for Hooker himself to hear. What was the use of calling us together at this time of night when he tended to retreat anyhow?
Exactly.
For Reynolds and his men, the whole campaign was a wasted effort.
Damn right.
The First Corps, some 17,000 strong, they barely even saw combat at Chancellorsville, and they lost only about 300 men in total, which is...
That might have changed things.
It's not all dead either. That's just injured and all that.
Damn.
So you had 17,000 men you didn't even use.
Right. After the battle, Reynolds joined a growing chorus of officers calling for Hooker's removal, just as he had spoken out against Ambrose Burnside after the disaster at Fredericksburg.
Can't even keep up who's the commander of the Potomac right now. There's so many of them.
Right. In private, Reynolds was blunt. In one letter he wrote, "If we do not get someone soon who can command an army without consulting Stanton and Halleck at Washington, I do not know what will become of this army." Quote, unquote. His frustration with
I could understand consultant Halleck. He is the army guy.
Maybe even Stanton, too.
He's Secretary of War, but they don't know shit.
Right. Either did Halleck.
Right.
His frustration with political interference in military decisions was reaching a boiling point. He said, screw this shit.
Old Abe himself took notice.
Oh.
June 2nd, 1863, Lincoln met with Reynolds privately. Many historians believe that during this meeting, Lincoln asked Reynolds if he would accept command of the entire Army of the Potomac. Ooh. Reynolds' answer was telling. He would only take the job if he were granted complete independence from the political meddling of Secretary of War Edwin Stanton and General-in-Chief Henry Halleck.
Wow.
He wanted a free hand to run the army as he saw fit.
Right. He's like, I'm going to do it. You don't, I'll tell you when I'll give you updates.
Right.
You don't give me no orders.
Unfortunately for him, which is clearly,
Not going to
you would think, that was a condition Lincoln couldn't meet.
Right.
So when Hooker was finally removed from command later that month, Lincoln turned instead to Reynolds' subordinate, the more junior Major General George Gordon Meade.
Which was a good call.
He assumed command of the Army of the Potomac June 28, just days before Gettysburg.
Well, we all know what happened on the 1st of July, 1863, the very first day of the Gettysburg battle. Union cavalry under General John Buford was already in position. Buford's men set up a light defensive lines, which was north and west of the town of Gettysburg, determined to hold off the advancing Confederates until Union infantry could arrive. Well, there were two rebel brigades that were pressing hard along the Chambersburg Pike. Buford's cavalry, fighting dismounted, was stretched thin. But then, just in time, through the foggy, dense forest, the lead elements of Reynolds' First Corps began to arrive.
Oh!
Wow. Right.
All right.
Damn.
Reynolds himself rode out ahead of the column to meet Buford. The two men quickly conferred, and then Reynolds personally accompanied some of his soldiers, likely from Brigadier General Lysander Cutler's brigade. They went straight into the thick of the fight at a place called Herbst Woods.
Oh, Herpes Landing?
As more reinforcements came up, Brigadier General Solomon Meredith's famous Iron Brigade, they marched onto the field as well.
Damn.
Reynolds took direct charge of placing the 2nd Wisconsin in the line. Riding among the troops, he shouted urgently, "Forward, men! Forward, for God's sake! And drive those fellows out of those woods!"
Ooh.
It was the last order he would ever give.
Damn it. Because in that very moment, a bullet struck Reynolds right in the back of the neck, or possibly the base of the skull.
Damn.
He fell from his
He was
horse.
struck from the back. That already tells you who shot him.
He fell from his horse and died almost instantly. Command of the First Corps passed to his senior division commander, Major General Abner Doubleday. The loss of John Reynolds was felt immediately and deeply. His men adored him his fellow officers respected him. In fact, historians noted that there are virtually no negative remarks about John Reynolds from any of his contemporaries. Later on, Shelby Foote, he would write that many considered Reynolds not only the highest ranking, but also the best general in the Army.
Mm-hmm. But beyond the personal tragedy, Reynolds' death had enormous consequences that day. By supporting Buford's defense and committed the 1st Corps Infantry, Reynolds essentially chose the ground on which the Battle of Gettysburg would be fought. What began as a chance encounter, it wasn't even supposed to happen. It began as a chance encounter. It quickly escalated into a full-scale battle, binding the Army of the Potomac to that location, even though Union forces were badly outnumbered at first by Confederate troops concentrating in the area.
Damn. After John Reynolds dead, command confusion reigned. 2 Union Corps that reached the field early in the day fought valiantly, but were eventually overwhelmed. Forced back through the streets of Gettysburg itself, Bluecoats retreated to the high ground in south of town. This is where they finally found stability. They rallied, reorganized by Reynolds' old friend, Major General Winfield Scott Hancock. John Reynolds' death marked the opening of one of the most decisive battles of the Civil War. And though he did not live to see it, his actions on that very first day helped shape the Bluecoats, winning that battle.
Right. After old John, he fell at Gettysburg. His body was quickly taken from the battlefield. First, it was transported to Taneytown, Maryland, and then on to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is his hometown. July 4th, Independence Day, the nation's celebrating with fireworks. Maybe. Oh, well, the North was, not the South.
Right.
Reynolds, he was laid to rest in his hometown. His loss was felt across the Union, and his memory was honored in ways that reflected both his importance as a soldier and his deep ties to Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Today, 3 statues of Reynolds stand within Gettysburg Military National Park. The other way around, National Military Park. An equestrian statue on McPherson Ridge, a statue by John Quincy Adams Ward in the National Cemetery, and another on the massive Pennsylvania Memorial. Beyond Gettysburg, there's also a statue of Reynolds in front of Philadelphia City Hall.
Oh, wow. His death, carried a deeply personal cost. Reynolds had been secretly engaged to Catherine Hewitt, as we all know. Before he left for war, they made a pact. If John Reynolds was killed, and they never had the chance to marry, she would dedicate her life to faith. Wow, he's like, she won't get nobody.
Right.
Wow. True to her word, after John was buried, Catherine traveled to Emmitsburg, Maryland, entered the St. Joseph Central House of the Order of the Daughters of Charity.
She became a nun.
Wow.
Even in death, Reynolds' story carried questions. Historians have long debated the exact circumstances of how he was killed. The details vary. Was it 10:15 a.m.? Or closer to 10:40 or even 10:50? Did it happen on East McPherson Ridge near the 2nd Wisconsin Infantry? Or on the western side closer to the 19th Indiana? And perhaps most debated of all, who fired the fatal shot?
You ain't kidding.
Some accounts say it came from a Confederate infantryman. Others insist it was the work of a sharpshooter. And still others raise the unsettling possibility that it might have even been friendly fire. He was shot from behind,
right.
So it's either friendly fire or a sharpshooter.
Right. Wow. One of the most cited sources is Sergeant Charles.
That's what was he facing his army when he was shot, and then
Maybe, right?
Right.
One of the most cited sources is Sergeant Charles Henry Vale, Reynolds' orderly and color guard. 1864, Vale wrote a letter describing the events. Decades later, in another letter written 45 years after the battle. Also, he contradicted some of his own details. Another important.
Well, it's 45 years later, so
Right.
I'm sure,
Another important piece of evidence comes from Reynolds' sister, Jenny, who wrote that the wound had a downward trajectory through the neck. That suggested that he was shot from above, perhaps by a sharpshooter hitting in a tree or a barn. Could be. Prominent historians have reached different conclusions. Bruce Catton, and Glenn Tucker, they both firmly argue that there was a sharpshooter. Stephen Sears says, don't go so fast, right? Not so fast. There it is. He said he believes that he was killed by a volley fire from the 7th Tennessee Infantry firing against the 2nd Wisconsin. Edwin Connington, he was like, I'm going to lean towards Stephen Sears' explanation. though he acknowledged that Jenny's letter made the sharpshooter idea at least credible.
Partly.
Right. Then you had Harry Fonz. He agreed with the general location behind the 2nd Wisconsin, but stopped short of saying how he died.
And then there's Steve Sanders, writing in Gettysburg magazine, who examined multiple accounts and suggested the possibility of friendly fire. He concluded it was just as likely Reynolds was struck by his own men as it was as enemy fire.
Right.
To this day, the mystery remains unsolved. Reynolds' exact final moment, like so much of the chaos of the battle, remains blurred and conflicting testimony. Wow. What isn't in question, though, is the impact of his leadership, his sudden death, and the way his actions helped set the stage for the Union victory at Gettysburg.
Reynolds' legacy reached beyond the battlefield and even beyond the statues and memorials. His hometown, Lancaster, a middle school carried his name, John F. Reynolds Middle School. This is a reminder to generations of students of the general who had once walked those same city streets. But old John Reynolds didn't just live on in stone and in school buildings. He also became a character in American storytelling. Because in 1974, Michael Shara's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Killer Angels, gave Reynolds a role in the drama of Gettysburg.
That's what the movie Gettysburg is based off of.
That novel, well, as we just said, inspired the 1993 film Gettysburg, where actor John Rothman stepped into the role of the fallen general.
Yeah. Film took some creative license with history, as it usually does.
Right.
Portraying Reynolds as the deliberate target of a Confederate sharpshooter.
Right.
Well, that scene wasn't purely Hollywood invention, though. It drew inspiration from a painting by the artist Don Troiani, who imagined Reynolds' death in just that way. Reynolds, he also makes appearance in Gods and Generals, which is the prequel novel written by Shara's son, Jeffrey. But when that book was adapted into a film in 2003, Reynolds, his role didn't make it onto the final cut.
Yeah, I mean, it's already a 4-hour damn long movie. Shit.
Yeah, through memorials, literature, film, and even classroom hallways, Reynolds' presence has continued to echo. His life and his death still woven into the ways of Americans that remember Gettysburg and the Civil War itself. John Reynolds.
Thus ends the story of John Fulton Reynolds.
Yes, sir. September 20th, 1820 to July 1st, 1863. 43.
A young 43 years old.
He was just a young troubadour, right? That's John Reynolds, probably one of the very few guys we've covered that nobody has anything bad to say about him.
No.
What other guy?
He's a good guy.
What other guy?
And his old lady loved him so much that she refused to even...
Right, do anything with anybody.
Right.
What other guy? What other guy
There's a
did
few.
somebody not say nothing bad about?
Chamberlain, I think.
Chamberlain was a good one, yeah. No.
Sickles? No, Sickles.
No, Sickles was a dick.
He's a sickle.
George Thomas, maybe.
Maybe.
I think George Thomas. Yeah, George Thomas was. Yeah, because Thomas was a Virginia guy and then
Right.
stayed with the Union.
Right,
so.
right.
So maybe a couple of them, but yeah, what are you gonna do? It's the war, politics, fuckery,
Yep.
and all that other shit. It's always gonna take the front place to doing the right thing in this war, apparently. But yeah, that's it for John Reynolds. Short one, but not much to his story. Only was in the war for 2 years, so didn't have a post-war life, unfortunately for him. But with that, we'll be back next week for a Confederate. We got a lot to choose from.
Right.
Who knows? Let's see. Let's do a random. Maybe it was still Stephen Dill Lee or even William Henry Fitzhugh Lee, one of them, or Rooney Lee. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. Either way, we'll be back for a gray coat. Till then, make sure you're liking, subscribe, and share with your fans. Give us a comment, a review, and all that other good stuff that comes along with podcasting. So we'll see you next week for more Behind the Battles of the American Civil War. We are the month of Second.